Hey everybody, let's talk about the job interview question. What are your strengths? Let's talk about how to answer this question. This is a very popular job interview question. And if you go to a job interview tomorrow, chances are you're going to be asked this question directly, or you're going to be asked another form of it. Because contrary to popular opinion, this question can take many, many forms, okay? Now here's an article that talks about this question. It's on wickedjobs.co.uk, and it addresses this job interview question in depth with a ton of examples and all kinds of very advanced analysis on what recruiters are getting at here. But in essence, this is actually a very simple question to answer. It's very simple, okay? If you're going for a job, you've applied for a job, and they ask you, what are your strengths, okay? The correct answer to this question is for you to talk about how you meet the posted job requirements that are listed in the job ad. Okay, most jobs, they'll have a job application and they'll have a job posting. And usually you stumble across the job posting and you decide to apply for the job. And in the job posting, they'll have a lot of information. They'll talk about what the job title is, what the duties are going to be, and then they'll have a section in there that talks about the qualifications and the requirements for the candidate. So the successful applicant will have all of these requirements. And usually that's in the form of, education. You'll have this qualification, and you'll also have these skills and this experience and perhaps these traits. So, when they ask you this question, okay, what are your strengths? You might be puzzled as to what to say, because you might think you have several strengths as a human being, and you might be tempted to just start listing them and talking about, how great you are and at doing all these various things. But the problem is that a lot of those might not be relevant to the job you're going for, and they might not be what the recruiter wants to hear. Okay. Another factor might be that if you say something that you consider a strength, how do you know that the recruiter or hiring manager doesn't consider that a weakness? Okay. And there's many examples of this. Like if you say, oh, I'm a very extroverted person. I like to be surrounded by people and I'm very good dealing with people, right? But the recruiter, upon hearing this, maybe a red flag goes off when they hear that, because they realize that this particular position, although you do have to deal with people to a certain extent, 3/4 of the time you're going to be working alone. And so perhaps saying you're an extrovert and you work best with people is perhaps not the thing to say, even though you consider that a strength, okay? Unbeknownst to you, that answer could get you eliminated from the running. So this is a problem that we have, okay, when confronted with this question in a job interview or on a job application or in any form, okay? We want to give the things that the recruiter or hiring manager considers to be a strength, okay? There's many things you could say about yourself. Which ones should you say? Okay, so like I said, the correct answer that tends to work in the vast majority of situations is to go back to the original job ad, look at the things that they're looking for, and when you're asked to give a strength or many strengths, you use that as your reference point, okay? Now, you can have the job listing in front of you in the interview, okay? There's nothing wrong with having notes in front of you or having papers in front of you or having a device in front of you. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that, okay? Now, if you were looking down at it constantly and not maintaining any kind of eye contact with the people that are interviewing you, that might be a problem. But there's nothing wrong with having something in front of you as a reference that you glance at occasionally, okay? And for that reason, I recommend that you have the original job ad with you in front of you in a job interview so that you can reference it. You can just glance at it, and that gives you some pointers as to perhaps what to say. Okay, it's even more useful if you've taken a highlighter or a pen and highlighted maybe certain words, okay? And a good thing to highlight would be one word from each one of the posted requirements for the job. That's what I would recommend. That's a very powerful thing to do. So then when they ask you, what are your strengths? You glance at that list and you say, well, they're looking for someone that has this particular educational qualification. Okay, a degree in this or a certificate in that. And you say, well, one of my strengths is that I have a certificate in this. I think it's really enabled me to do this kind of work, and I take pride in it, and I've applied it quite a lot, and it's really opened a lot of doors in terms of my capabilities. And that's what I consider one of my greatest strengths, is that I have this, and I've been trained in this. So if you were to say something like that, the recruiters hearing this would probably value that answer. They'd probably score that pretty high, because that is, after all, something they're looking for. You're speaking to what they're wanting in a candidate. Okay? Now, and if you have to list more strengths, you speak to more of those requirements. In fact, at the end of the job interview, if you've done a good job, you should have been able to express that you can speak, or you should be able to speak to every single one of the posted job requirements more than once. Okay, twice or possibly even 3 times in the course of a longer job interview. Okay, if you leave the job interview and you never really told them that you had this particular qualification, and you never spoke to any of the posted job requirements, that wasn't included in any of your answers, then that's probably a bad thing. Okay, you haven't really made a great argument why you are the candidate and you have everything that they're looking for. Okay, so this question is a very good vehicle to do that. Now, there's there's a hell of a lot of forms of this question. Okay, another form of what are your strengths is, for example, why should we hire you? Right? I mean, when you think about it, how do you answer what are your strengths? Well, you list your strengths, right? When somebody asks you, why should we hire you? How would you answer that? Well, you would list your strengths. You would give them reasons. Here's why you would hire me. So when you think about it, it's the same answer to those 2 questions, because it's essentially the same question. Okay? So this question is pretty much guaranteed to come up in your job interview. It's guaranteed to come up. It might be in a different form. They might say, why do you want to work here? You know, that's another form of it. And you say, well, I'd like to work here because you seem to be looking for someone with this, and this. And you know what? I have this, and this. So it looks like it's right up my alley. It looks like I'm a good fit for what you're looking for, you know? Okay, so that's how you answer those types of questions. Now, let's look at what this article says in a little more depth here, okay? Why do interviewers like to ask this question, okay? Like its counterpart, what are your weaknesses? This question is very likely to come up. They are asked together, okay? Ensure that your strengths are in line with the skill set required for the role. Exactly. That's what they're probing for. They would like you to say all the things that they happen to be looking for. And you know what they're looking for because it's written in the posted job requirements. Okay? And then a bunch of secondary things to see if you're self-aware and you can speak about yourself with confidence. Test for qualities and experience. Because the thing is, they don't believe you when you talk about what experience and education you have. This is a thing. You know, a lot of people can talk a good game and say they have all kinds of, accomplishments and experience and education. For all the interviewer knows, that's all a fabrication. They don't know. And one of the things they test for is to test your veracity, make sure that, the things on your resume aren't fabrications. Because, you know, if you said, oh, I have a law degree, but they ask you the most basic question about one of the local laws and you've never heard of it, that would be a red flag, right? So that's another reason they're asking you for this kind of stuff. And to assess your communication skills, okay? Now, I want to make a very important point here. A lot of newer job seekers are unaware of this, and that is the job interviews, okay? If you're asked this question at an interview, a lot of job interviews are about soft skills, okay? if you had said on your resume something that would be a deal breaker, like for example, they absolutely need somebody to have, say, a law degree, and on your resume it clearly shows that you don't have a law degree. Okay, on your education, there's no law degree there. There's nothing even close. Okay, now if not having a law degree was a deal breaker for the position, and that's what your resume showed, they wouldn't call you in for an interview. Okay, so the fact that you were called in for an interview, that signals the fact that your resume was not a deal breaker. There's nothing on there that disqualifies you for the job. Okay, so the technical requirements that they're looking for, they feel that based on what you've said in your resume, they can make the technical requirements work. Okay, you would be at least acceptable as a candidate. Okay, and from then, the fact that they bring you in for an interview, now they're going to start narrowing candidates down. The pool of candidates are going to start narrowing it down based on your soft skills, okay? Because if one candidate has all the technical things they need, but that candidate is arrogant, rude, impossible to work with, and delusional, and acting inappropriately, they would eliminate that candidate based on those soft skills, okay? So what they're also looking for throughout the interview is things like communication skills, okay? How well you can express yourself. Things like interpersonal skills. You know, do you act inappropriately? Do you understand protocol? Do you understand manners? Do you understand how to communicate and how to interact in such a way that people enjoy communicating with you and interacting with you? That's what they're looking for, okay? Now, this stuff is really not hard. And practice makes perfect. Anybody can master this. I don't care what your situation is. Anybody can master this. Okay. So that's what they're looking for. But the bottom line is that when they ask this question, they're looking for you to speak to the requirements. Now, what if you don't meet every single one of the posted job requirements? This is a concern for a lot of people. And let's face it, a lot of jobs, they list all kinds of requirements that, quite frankly, it's a pretty tall order for someone to meet all of them, okay? So the question is, what if they list, say, 12 things that they're looking for, and you have 9, okay? What do you do? Well, here's the deal. First of all, when you answer this question, you would obviously go to the things that you do meet first, okay? However, if you've already said all that, and maybe you've even repeated some of those things a few times, okay? The question is, what can you say about the other 3 things that you don't meet? Well, here's the thing. Part of doing preparation for a job interview and is looking at the requirements and getting your story straight for if they zero in on the things that you don't technically meet. Okay? As I said, if you were called in for an interview, that signals that they haven't found any deal breakers on your resume. So if you don't have anywhere on there that you have a thing that they're looking for, they obviously don't consider that a deal breaker. Okay, so it's a matter of putting a good spin on the situation. Now, let's pretend that you don't have what they're looking for, technically. But maybe you have some experience that sort of goes into that territory. Okay? So if someone says, you know, okay, one of the requirements is that you have 5 years experience doing this. Do you have that? And they ask you this pointed question. You can say, well, you know what? Okay, I don't have 5 years experience directly. However, I do have 3 years experience in this other role where some of my duties did involve doing things that were very similar to that. So I don't believe it's going to be a problem, okay? Because I have done that kind of work, I know it's involved, and I know I can do it. And if you were to call my previous boss and ask them if I've done that kind of work, they would probably say yes, and they'd back me up that, you know, yes, I have what it takes to do that kind of work, and I have done that kind of work before. Okay? So what you're doing is that even though you don't technically meet it, you're still saying something that's perhaps close to it, or would alleviate their concern that it would be a problem for you. Okay, so that's what I mean by speaking to a requirement. Obviously, it's better if you flat out meet the requirement, but if you don't, you could still say something that you've done that's similar, or it's on the way to it, or anything that would say, you know, this is not going to be a problem. Okay, so that's something that I would do in the preparation phase. If you're preparing for a job interview, look at the requirements. If there's any on there that you don't meet, see if you can put a positive spin on what you do have, say how it relates to it. And just the theme of what you're saying is that, well, it's not going to be a problem. Okay? So that's basically how you would answer this. Now, there's all kinds of things in here. Now, this, I just want to finish off by saying articles like this, I mean, they're not horrible, but in my opinion, they really toe the party line that recruiters want candidates to know. Okay? They want candidates to answer honestly, which is always a good thing, but they want candidates to answer blindly. Okay? Because the idea is that if you don't know what the recruiter is probing for and what they're wanting to hear, if you just talk off the top of your head about your strengths, they're looking for a situation where what you said randomly just so happens to align with what they're looking for. Okay? And if you can achieve that, then in theory, you've got the right candidate. Okay? That's how that works. What they're probing for is they're probing for the requirements. Okay? The problem is if you know that they're doing this, then this experiment kind of fails a little on their, from their perspective, because you're telling them what they want to hear. Okay, it's no longer serendipitous; it's something crafted. And so what they do here is they basically preach that, oh, just be honest. Just answer. What's really important to you. Okay, and this is within their own interests, but not for yours. So a lot of these articles kind of talk about that, and they give you examples that, this social media skills, qualifications, languages, training. Well, in most jobs, these are not going to be pertinent, okay, because those are not the requirements. So that theme runs through this, okay? So I just want you to be aware of that, okay? So that's how you answer this question. They give you some sample answers here. I'm going to post a link to this article. So if you want, you can check it out yourself on wikijob.co.uk. And you can read this, but I would caution you that what they're looking for is essentially for you to say how you meet the qualifications. Okay. They do talk about the STAR technique. I've done several videos on the STAR method of answering. This is if you have to back up your strengths with examples. Okay, now sometimes you can, but the problem there is that then your answer gets very long and can be very time consuming, and they could basically shut you down before you're done. Okay, now if you have rehearsed your strengths and these examples using the STAR format, situation, task, action, result, then it makes sense. Okay, but if you haven't rehearsed it, then don't worry about this. Only give specific examples if they prompt you for it, in my opinion. Because the risk there is that, as I say, you could run on too long. So hopefully this makes sense. Thank you very much for your attention. Don't forget to subscribe, and I will see you guys on the next video. Take care.